Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, this killing of the Border Patrol officer, quite interesting. Always new information coming out every day, or more accurate information. We just learned today that in the car stop where Border Agent David Milan was killed, there was 3 Border Patrol agent vehicles on the scene. And they were stopped. They had them stopped for like 25 to 30 minutes. So right away we questioned, like, what was going on in those 25 or 30 minutes? Because this wasn't just a stop based on a traffic violation or anything. They had information on the people that they were stopping. They had information that possibly there was, here's the 2 individuals involved. Felix Ophelia on the left, Felix Ophelia Buckholt. And to the right, Teresa Youngblood. And of course, in the middle is Border Patrol Agent David Milan. They had information that they were acting quite suspiciously inside a local hotel, dressed in camouflage gear, wearing masks. Their behavior was quite suspicious. And the owners, the workers at the hotel, they raised up Border Patrol, and they were under surveillance for approximately a week. So when we hear that 3 Border Patrol cars stopped this vehicle, and they were apparently interacting with them for 25 to 30 minutes, and then at some point, Teresa Youngblood fires at Border Officer David Milan, causing his death. And then, Felix Buckholt goes for his gun, and he is shot and killed by the Border Patrol, as is Teresa Youngblood is wounded. So all of these things are coming together. And then we see the nexus between all of these individuals now you see here, on this screen. And we're going to go over some of the other incidents that they were involved in. And truly, you see this person on the screen, and that is the leader, Ziz, he's known as. His name is, he's the leader of this trans group. And he goes by the name of Ziz, but his actual name is Jack Sota. And so all of this new information, and there is an ideology. There is an ideology here. And that's one of the things that brings these cults together and makes them do bad things. And a lot of times they think they're a lot smarter than everybody else, So, folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your drink, hold on to your next door neighbor, hold on to your loved ones. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now a word from our sponsor. The biggest betting weekend of the year is finally here, which means more updated odds and props for Super Sunday. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. We have hundreds of prop bets, MVP odds, and exclusive in-game live betting. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline offers you everything and more to enhance your game day experience. Visit the website today and make game the day action count a little bit more. BetOnline, the game starts here. I'm going to bring in, we have two great guests sharing our police experience, sharing our academic experience. And first, I'm going to bring on the screen retired NYPD Sergeant criminal justice professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, and attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Welcome, Mike.
Bill, good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
It's
Good
great
evening.
to have you on, Mike. And we also bring from the streets. We got a street detective coming in here, and we got from straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD detective Phil Grimaldi. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you for having me. And you're right, a street detective. I like that.
You know, Newsweek came up with some new information here, information that we haven't perhaps heard in this recently. And that's the recent killing of U.S. Border Patrol agent in Vermont is reportedly linked to a purported death cult made up of radical, highly educated vegan and transgender members known as the Zizians. The group is said to revolve around Ziz, who is a transgender woman. Ziz, whose legal name is Jack Sota, garnered a following online after posting about her ethical and social theories on her blog, Sinceriously. This was how Felix Ophelia Buchholz, the German national involved in the shooting last week, discovered Sota, Buchholz's friend, Jessica Taylor, told Newsweek. She was interested in things like effective altruism and criticisms of it, ethics, ethical veganism, mathematics, decision theory, a lot of the same topics as Ziz. And she had similar views on a number of things, Taylor said of Buchholz. Taylor posted on X, formerly Twitter, after hearing of the shooting, saying that she knew Buchholz and calling out the Zizians. Buchholz, who is also a transgender woman, was fatally shot on January 20th after she and another individual identified as Teresa Youngblood engaged in a shootout with Border Patrol agents. Agents David Milan was killed in the gunfight after he and other agents pulled the pair over in a traffic stop. After Buchholz was identified by authorities and Taylor realized it was her friend who had been killed, she thought Sota may have been involved, given her friend's fondness for the blogger and the pattern of violence that she said matched up to what she knew of the group. She posted on X, formerly Twitter, after hearing of the shooter, saying that she knew Buchholz. I remember warning Ophelia that Zizians were a death cult with a high local death rate, Taylor wrote. Taylor, who said she had not spoken to Buchholz since 2023, told Newsweek the group tended to choose victims of petty authority like landlord or parent, or in this case, a Border Patrol agent, and that she and Buchholz had even previously discussed the high death rate around the Zizians. So this is quite disturbing. The guns used by Buchholz, an award-winning youth math genius from Germany, and Youngblood, a computer science student at the University of Washington, have since been determined as belonging to a person of interest in other murders. That individual has been identified by Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives authorities as bioinformatics researcher Michelle Zako. So this gets very convoluted, very interesting, Mike. I mean, I don't think that they truly know. I think they believe, this is Michelle Zako, they believe that she supplied the guns. But then we get other people that think the real violent person was, I'm going to pull up a picture, Schneider. Yes, in this picture right here. Schneider, who was engaged to be married to Teresa Youngblood. So there's a possibility that Schneider, Maximilian Schneider, could be the shooter and the killer of Richard Zako and Rita Zako in Pennsylvania in 2023. Mike, I know it's convoluted. I'm throwing a lot at you, but that's why you're called the professor. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the movement of the firearms from what I could see from the federal complaint against Ophelia, no, Buchholz. I'm sorry, not Buchholz, Youngblood. And it's from when you read it and you look how the guns are traveling, they seem to have gone from Zako to Snyder, and from like maybe Snyder, perhaps then to Buchholz and Youngblood. And it seems that when you're reading about this and you're looking and you match up the movement of the firearms, and then you do the chronology of the attack on Mr. Lind in 2022, the fatal murder in 2024, I'm sorry, early 2025, the shooting with Malin dying in 2025, and you start to see the movement of firearms. You put it with the chronology, you get to realize that at this point, it's possible that the poor Zako couple, who they think, who were shot in Pennsylvania, that it could be that Snyder was actually the hitman, and perhaps because of his relationship with Michelle Zako, was given access to the home. And I'm thinking that because Zako would probably want to make sure that she was out of town at the time that the parents were killed. And the person who seems the most violent, of even more so than I think Youngblood and Burkholdt, I think, is Snyder, because of his repeated attacks on Lind, which resulted in a fatal slitting of his throat several weeks ago.
He seems to be the most violent of the group.
Yeah.
Not shy about using violence. And Curtis Lind was not. He was attacked another time. And we have two different photos of him. And in one of the photos, you could see he lost his right eye.
Right.
They stabbed him in an attack in his right eye. When they set him up, he was their landlord and they weren't paying his rent, and he confronted them and they intended on killing him. This is Curtis Lind before he lost his eye, before he was attacked. He was going to be a witness against them in this attack, but he was killed, we believe, by Maximilian Schneider prior to the court appearance. And Maximilian Schneider is currently, there is a picture of him on the screen, is currently in jail in California. Phil.
Billy, as they say, the plot thickens. We're learning some stuff that we didn't know beforehand from that complaint that Mike was just talking about. They had a dozen electronic devices in the vehicle, that was searched after the shooting of Maland. So we know cell phones encapsulated in aluminum foil, a dozen electronic devices. This Burkholdt was a genius, basically, used mathematics in quantitative trading in the stock market. He had a very high-paying job, as we know, and it uses mathematics to set up different theories on how to strategize in the stock market. Apparently, he did very well in that area. And this is not someone who is, just a regular, ordinary, uneducated street thug. This was someone with high intelligence. We know that the car stop, we found that out today, the car stop went on for in excess of 30 minutes before the shooting started. So what happened in that time period? The Border Patrol agents had been on them, surveilling them for about a week. They decided to do a car stop, as we know in law enforcement, possibly to identify who these individuals were, see if they had proper identification, proper insurance registration, things of that nature, identify them. Now, as they're talking to them, something triggered this shooting, something that these agents either were about to uncover or were asking questions about, caused them to try and shoot it out with the popo, as we say, with the police. And one of them was killed. The officer was killed, unfortunately. I just feel like this is a much bigger criminal enterprise than we're really seeing. And we stressed this in the last couple of shows. The mainstream media is ignoring it. It has a negative connotation, perhaps, in the trans community. I don't look at anything other than the case that's in front of me when I investigate a case. I don't care what color you are, what your sexual orientation is, what your religion is, your background is. If you're involved in criminal activity, that's what law enforcement looks at. However, journalists today in 2025, they're ignoring this story. We know that just about only a handful of journalists are even cover it. We know Andy No is put out a couple of videos. I'm sure you're going to play one of them, Bill. So there's a lot more here than we see. We did get some new information today, and I think we have to dig deeper and really find out what was going on in this group.
Fairy Tale Lane, who has Jack murdered? Well, under arrest for the murder of Curtis Lind is Maximilian Schneider. I don't know if that's who you're referring to. Fairy Tale Lane. Are green enthusiasts considered a cult too? Fairy Tale Lane, they're considered a cult based on their ideology and based on their willingness to use violence to spread that ideology. That is why they're considered a cult, and based on the fact that they intend to commit crimes. Well, when you
The
say
Jack that I think they're talking about, Bill, in that question was Jack Lasota, who's the head of
Right,
the
head guy.
Zizians, and
right,
we don't know that he's involved in any criminal activity as of yet. But he's the leader of this group that we believe is, we're going to call it a cult for all intents and purposes. And I believe that's who he was referring
right.
to.
Well, we don't know if Jack Lasota, we don't know if he is involved in any of this violence or any of the murders. What we do know is Maximilian Schneider has been charged with the murder of Curtis Lind. So that we do know. We found this video in regards to Andy No. We're going to play it up on the screen.
There a trans terror cell operating within the U.S.? And can a number of homicides be pinned on this alleged terror cell? Yes, to both questions. He reports, quote, an elderly Pennsylvania couple was murdered in homicide in January 2023. An 82-year-old California man was brutally stabbed to death on January 17, 2025. A U.S. Border Patrol officer was shot dead on January 20th, 2025 in Vermont. The cases are all allegedly linked, end quote. And he's surprised there isn't more media attention on the story. Joining us now to discuss his chilling and frankly tragic findings is Andy No, an independent journalist and a senior editor for The Post Millennial. He's also the author of Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Andy, thanks for being here tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Right, so there's a lot here that you've uncovered, but first, to kind of get ourselves situated, can you walk us through the basic breakdown of who this main pair is, or I guess I should say was, since one of them is now deceased, and how it culminated into the tragic shooting of the Border Patrol agent that we all heard about on Trump's inauguration day?
So the story has now reached a point where it can no longer be ignored by the mainstream media. We are seeing reporting by AP, San Francisco Chronicle, and others about how the killing of the CBP officer was not isolated, allegedly, according to prosecutors. It's linked now to at least 5 other deaths. So the story is there was a trans duo on inauguration day who were allegedly involved in a deadly encounter with a Border Patrol officer in Vermont near the Canadian border. Initially, at first, the focus, at least in conservative media, was that the German national who died in the shootout may have been here on an expired H-1B visa. That's still a bit unclear, but what's emerged as we've learned more about the female suspect, who's also transgender identifying, who was apprehended alive, is that both of them allegedly have links to a California-based transgender group, some call it a cult, that are allegedly involved in multiple homicides across the US spanning back the last few years. And some of these killings are really horrific. The most recent one happened on the 17th of January, involving an 82-year-old man in the Bay Area who was set to testify as a key witness in a murder and attempted murder trial against members of this group. The suspect who was just apprehended and charged over the alleged assassination of this elderly man is the fiance of the female who's apprehended in Vermont. And if you read the court documents, the weapons that were used in this shootout allegedly belong to an individual who is also transgender and is the child of a double homicide that happened in Pennsylvania. So there's been multiple people who have been killed. Several members of the group have died in their attacks on other people as well. So the story is really big. It's not being covered accurately because one big glaring omission in all the headlines, if you read in legacy media, is that nobody's reporting out that all of these individuals are transgender identifying in some way, and their extremist ideology includes aspects of transhumanism, and of course, transgenderism.
As you talk about the Vallejo man in California who was murdered quite recently, he had been attacked by members of this group before, right? I think maybe over rent. He lost his eye. So there you see him with both of his eyes. The other picture he showed of him, he was missing an eye, and then unfortunately he was then finally killed. But could you talk about that case a little more? Because
yeah, the story is confusing, I understand, and I've been trying to simplify it as best as I can, but it really, you can't, because it involves so many people. All of them have aliases, they have fake names, they have so-called dead names. So the legal name is different from what they identify as, and they're all transgender. So the case of Curtis Lint, that's the 82-year-old man who was brutally hacked to death and had his throat slit in the Bay Area on the 17th of January. He had survived narrowly another attempt on his life by members of this group in November of 2022. So during the pandemic, for several years, he had rented out his property, a plot of land, to this group, and they lived in box trucks on his property. And according to neighbors and what local media is reporting, was very bizarre what they were doing. They would walk around wearing gas masks, and they set up solar panels. He said that he was ambushed in an attack by 3 members of this group, 3 transgender members, and they impaled him, and he had a firearm for self-defense. And lucky that he did, because he shot back and he killed one of them, a transgender person named Amir Borhanian, also known as Emma, and injured one of the others, and one was uninjured. So the 2 surviving attackers, alleged attackers, assailants, have an upcoming trial in April for attempted murder and other felony crimes. And he was the sole witness to that attack and also the survivor, and he's been killed.
So a lot of information right there, a real lot of information. And it's part of that, Mike, is that in the charges, even in the case where Mr. Curtis Lind defended himself and killed one of his attackers, the other attackers can be charged with murder for him killing one of their own, because the underlying felony is the assault against him, causing the death, leading to the death of one of their own. Explain that law to the people listening.
In this case with Lind, he was set upon by someone named Surrey Dow, another person named Latham, whose picture you see second from the right on the top row, and Emma Borhanian, who is the one that's all the way over on the right-hand side on the top row. So he was attacked by 3 people. He shoots, he's stabbed. He's got like a samurai sword in his chest. He was stabbed in the eye. He takes his firearm out and he shoots Borhanian. That person dies. Latham and Surrey Dow are uninjured at that point. They are arrested for his attempted murder. However, because his self-defense was considered lawful self-defense, because he was defending his life from attackers, any death that occurred during that incident is going to be charged against the original defendants. So not only are Dow and Latham charged with Mr. Lind's attempted murder, they're also supposed to stand trial also for the murder of Borhanian, their fellow conspirator in this case, because they started the ball rolling, and because of their actions caused the death of their friend. So they're looking at attempted murder and also murder charges at the same time, and they were supposed to go to trial starting in April.
So, I mean, convoluted again. You know, we've explained that this case, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of players here. Right now, there is a manhunt, of course, described for Michelle Zako. And I'll pull up her picture here. And for Jack Lasota, who is right there. Now, after the murder of Zako's parents right here in Pennsylvania in 2023, it's believed that Michelle Zako, who you see on the screen here, she was interviewed by the police, but they didn't have anything to hold her. So right now, we can't tell, and law enforcement isn't talking, is the murderer of the parents of Michelle Zako, is it Michelle Zako? Or could it be Maximilian Schneider, since he seems to be the most violent of this group? And the only commonality here are the guns, that we believe the guns were a 40 caliber Glock semi-automatic and a 380 semi-automatic, which were found at the scene of the shooting of the Border Patrol officer David Milland. Phil.
Well, when the police questioned Michelle Zako, she made statements that she did purchase those firearms, those type of firearms, the firearms that were now found in the possession of the two people that were involved in the shooting of David Milland, which were Felix Bourcolt and Teresa Consuelo Youngblood. So there's definitely a connection here to these cases. Those are the firearms that were used in the murder. What we don't know is did she actually commit the murder, or was someone else in the group responsible for the actual pulling of the trigger in the murder? However, I think it sounds like to me that this person, Michelle Zako, I got to keep looking down because there's so many names in here, possibly supplied the weapons, maybe gave some access to the home. The question I have about that murder is, what is the reason for the murder? What is the motive? Was there a financial gain in the future of Michelle Zako by the death of her parents? So I think that that's one of the aspects that's being looked at. Why would she want her parents dead? She bought those firearms. Those firearms are used in the killing. And now she takes the firearms, and I believe she tried to give them to or transfer them to Bourcolt and Youngblood. So with all of these things going on, they did question her. I don't know if there was enough information to make an arrest, but it sounds like an acting in concert type of thing. And Mike, I think the way you explained about the felony murder, when you go out and you commit a felony, and during that felony, a group of people committing a felony, a person is killed. That's where the murder charge comes in. I think you explained that pretty nicely. I know in New York, we call it acting in concert murder. Felony murder. So that's where the murder charge would come from in the Lynn case. And as far as what's going on in this case, there's a lot of tentacles to this whole case. There's two people that we know. Jack Lazzota, that person asked earlier, what has Jack Lazzota done? We don't know, but he is on the run. And we know that Michelle Zako is on the run. We don't know how many other individuals are involved in this group, this cult, whatever you want to call it. But I think there's going to be a lot of light shed on this case with those electronics that were recovered. Now, we know that a lot of times these computers are encrypted. It may take the FBI some period of time to get into those electronics, find out who they were communicating with. Maybe perhaps there is some type of list of people that are involved in it. And there's going to be a long investigation to follow. There's a lot of tentacles in this case, and the FBI really has their work cut out for them for sure.
By the way, Michelle Zako is a biological male, and Michelle Jacqueline Zako. And there's a picture of her, I guess, in her day-to-day life. She was another brilliant person, worked in the medical field, and I believe was either working on a master's in some biological, some really heavy duty. So all of these people involved in this cult are like, well, these brilliant students. I can't say they're brilliant with common sense, but they're brilliant. They're really super smart students. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, hit that like button, share us with your friends and your family. And if you want to contribute to us, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels, and we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can join our YouTube channel and be part of the Police Off the Cuff YouTube family. And we appreciate all of our friends, our family members that support this show and make this show what it is.
In 2023, Michelle Zyko's parents were found dead in their suburban Philadelphia home. Zyko is considered a person of interest in that case. The 32-year-old is also suspected of buying 2 handguns used in the Vermont shootout that killed Border Patrol agent David Malin. Court documents allege this woman, 21-year-old Teresa Youngblood, got out of a car during a traffic stop and fired toward police. A companion in the car with her, Felix Baucolt, died in the exchange of gunfire. A federal court filing that News 9 obtained Friday says investigators found Youngblood's journal with writings about using the drug LSD. What she and Baucolt were doing in Vermont is unclear. Now, this could all be connected to yet another killing. Officials say this person, Maximilian Snyder, is charged with murdering an 82-year-old landlord in Northern California earlier this month. Back in November, Snyder and Youngblood filed a marriage application in Washington state. Whether they are married is unclear. The San Francisco Chronicle, which is also owned by Hearst, says Zyko and Snyder are also associated with a person named Ziz Lasota, formerly known as Jack Lasota. Investigators say Lasota founded a fringe group in California focused on AI, veganism, and gender theory. Several members of that group are now suspected of being connected to violent crimes. Now, Youngblood is being held without bail. Federal prosecutors wrote in court documents that she traveled internationally in the past few years, indicating she has the money and capacity to run away. She's due back in court next week. Police say Zyko may be in a green Subaru Outback with an expired Vermont registration.
So
in 2023, Michelle Zyko's parents were found.
There you go. I mean, Zyko is still on the loose right now, and they're saying he's a person of interest. And of course, Jack Ziz Lasota, no one knows where he is right now. In fact, he even tried to fake his own death, and even coming up with an obituary to try to fool law enforcement that he was dead. And I don't think they bought that. But anyway, so those are the two that we know from this cult, the Zizian cult, that are still around. Donna V., the parents owned an expensive home and several rental properties. I think they're financing this group from the proceeds of their estate. Additionally, the Zizians talk about taking resources. You know, Donna, we sort of predicted that yesterday, that was the murder of these two individuals. Was it Richard Zyko and Rita Zyko? Was it to gain their assets, to feed this group? And I think you just potentially answered that for us, that they were murdered for their homes, for their assets. And that's what, to me, would make Michelle Jacqueline Zyko probably suspect number one. But you know, early on in the investigation, apparently she was interviewed and released. Mike.
Yeah, Bill, when you're sitting there at the time that they didn't have the firearms, and and I'm thinking that she had an excuse. She had an alibi. And that's why I'm thinking, as I'm looking at the chronology of the shootings, I'm looking at the movement of the firearms, that I'm kind of convinced a little bit that Snyder is the shooter in this case, because I think that Michelle would want to, Zyko would want to be out of the house and have an excuse, maybe be in another state, maybe somewhere where everybody would see her and could vouch for her whereabouts. So I'm thinking, probably the motive would be financial, because she's the only child of that couple. They were fairly well-to-do. They had a beautiful home. They had rental properties. Those properties were probably at least $250,000 to $500,000 altogether when you look at the beautiful home, because they're right outside Philadelphia. So that's a huge incentive. And perhaps there was also a lot of animosity between Michelle and her parents due to her lifestyle and her beliefs. And so therefore, it looks like a lot of this stuff is coordinated between several of the cult's members. And in fact, if you look at the death of Mr. Lind, that was January 17th, 2025. And he's supposed to be romantically linked to Teresa Youngblood.
Yes.
And she shot it out with the police January 20th. So I'm not sure that there's any coincidence whatsoever. I think there's a lot of planning going on and a lot of communication between these groups. And I think that they work like in a team. Like you've got Zyko and Snyder, and then you've got Buckhold, and then you've got Youngblood. But quite a dangerous group.
There's not a
Phil, I think if I was running this investigation, one of the most interesting things and one of the biggest pieces of evidence would be their cell phones, because they have to be communicating with each other. They have to be GPS where they have been, where they went, where they're going, the text messages, all the contents of and of course, in that vehicle that they were pulled over in, there were laptops and there was several cell phones, and of course, all of the other sort of combat gear they had inside that vehicle. Phil, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say there's the financial possible motive for the murder of the Zaskos, but also perhaps the Zaskos started to ask questions of Michelle and perhaps maybe uncovered some criminal activity. So, Bill, you really hit the nail right on the head, whether it be the cell phone or the computer. I'd want to go back and look at if there was any communications about, oh, my mom and pop, they know about this and that with other members of the group. So I think with those communications, those electronics, we could come up possibly with the motive. There had to be some discussion, whether it be come into the house because the daughter's going to know the movements of the family, what time they'd be most vulnerable late at night, what time they go to bed, things of that nature. Perhaps supply a key to the house or a code to the alarm to get into the house. A lot of times people have doors with you don't even need a key. It's just a code. You have to punch in a code. So if she supplied that information, perhaps there was some communication between the groups. It could have been more than one person. It could have been more than we think possibly Snyder. It could have been someone else in the group. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts, but Billy, you hit the nail right on the head. That is going to be the key to this investigation. All of the cell phones, all of the laptops, all of the electronics, social media activity. We know that they had to be promoting this somewhere, whether it be on the dark web or in chat rooms, whatever it is. All of those things are going to give a lot of clues and put a lot of the pieces of the puzzle together. And I'm stuck on what was it that caused them, when I say them, Buckhold and Youngblood, to open up on those Border Patrol agents on the 25th. What caused that? I mean, there was something happening at that time. I know they were pulled over for a period of time. What I'm getting at is, what did they do? What did they have to worry about that they would so violently attack law enforcement officers? That, to me, that means there was a high bounty of what they were worried about they were going to get caught on. Probably some major criminal activity. They saw that the walls were closing in, and they decided to shoot it out with the police. Unfortunately for Special Agent, Border Patrol Agent David Milland, he lost his life.
Martha Sylvester, they are planning something. FBI knows what. Yeah, I agree with
Could
you.
be.
We don't know right now. Urban infidel. This is so crazy. I'm honestly having a hard time trying to understand it. Donna V. Their ideology seems to allow them to take what they call resources if they need them more than the rightful owners. This all feels like spoiled rich kids that feel entitled. Well, Donna V, don't all criminals take what they need that doesn't belong to them, and they justify it by surviving? That's how they survive. Crime. They commit crime to survive. Dr. D, NGNL, I'm too old to decipher that into something I can understand. At Urban Infidel, do a deep dive on that sometime. It'll scare you. Cindy Lou, so close to the Canadian border where they're going to buy drugs in Vermont, the border is quite easy to cross up there. Fairy Tale Lane, Poem Paget. I have many students and friends and employers that are part of the LGTB community. The truth, Billy the Hammer.
Billy, you would think normal people in the LGBT community would be outraged at this kind of, it's a negative look for the LGBT community. And they're violent. They're killing people. So anyone with rational thinking is going to be outraged by this. So the fact that these journalists and mainstream media is not covering it, it's a poor excuse that just because they're trans that, we're not going to look at this. That's really not the way that it should be covered. And I said it before, Bill, I know that you'll agree with me. I know you'll agree with me, Mike. We never looked at when we went into a family dispute, we didn't care about who the players were. We were there to try and settle the dispute, keep the violence to a minimum, and direct people to a family court or whatever it was. That was a family dispute. If it's a murder investigation, you go into it. The fact that a person could be gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, black, white, whatever it is, it really didn't matter. We were there to investigate the crime. And I'm being specific, we're there to investigate a murder. So all of that really does not have any input on how we're going to think or how we're going to investigate the case. So why would that fact that there's trans involved in this dictate how journalists are going to cover the story? I mean, it's really outrageous.
Or not cover the story, which I find
Yes,
outrageous.
yes.
Casey and Jimmy just read a write-up from Vallejo, which describes in some detail that the Zizians are an offshoot from another group in Berkeley, of course. Only truth, the world of LDKJV. What's up with the discrepancies between the social media and surveillance photos of Youngblood? There's been a lot of confusion in this case. Early on in this case, the incorrect photo was put out on social media of Youngblood, and we and myself included had the wrong picture of her. And now these pictures came from the surveillance cameras and some came from her own social media site. Let me play this here.
In Delaware County, a couple was killed in their home 2 years ago. And tonight, our Shawnette Wilson has new details on a person of interest and other murders they may be tied to.
State police say a gun may be the link between two cases involving deadly shootings, one dating back to New Year's Eve of 2022. New developments in an investigation that had gone quiet since the double murders inside this Chester Heights home 2 years ago. Still, no one is arrested for the deadly shooting of 72-year-old Richard Zachko and 69-year-old Rita Zachko. Now, Pennsylvania State Police say a gun used in another shooting was bought by a person of interest in the murder of the Zachkos, who is also a person of interest in a murder in California. Federal investigators made the discovery after an incident on January 20th of last week, when they say a U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agent was killed near a Canadian border crossing in northern Vermont after a car stop. The two people in the car have been identified as Teresa Youngblood and Felix Ophelia Bachholt. Bachholt was killed during an exchange in gunfire with federal agents. The woman was arrested. Investigators have not named the person of interest in the Delco double murders, who they say purchased the gun used in the shooting of the Border Patrol agent. Meanwhile, a neighbor I talked to off camera tonight, walking her dog near the victim's old home on Highland Drive in Chester Heights, said neighbors hadn't heard anything since the murders. Investigators then said they found the husband and wife 2 days into the new year while making a wellness check at the home. No motive has been released. Neighbors then said they knew little of the couple, but one recalled seeing the man and that he was friendly.
When we're going on walks, we'd always see him cutting his grass or maintaining his lawn or doing, yard work and things like that. And we'd always wave and he'd always wave back in a smile.
And investigators are still looking for information regarding these two investigations. You can call any criminal investigations unit at Pennsylvania State Police.
So that's the story. I mean, as I said, this case is quite involved. Scheme, boomer police. I love how you call us boomer police. These people are not smart, but idiot savant. I think you mean savant, S-A-V-A-N-T. Clearly unfunctional, autistic. They wear combat gear, checking in, also not rational, more like rationalizations. Scheme, I disagree with you. Yes, they're inept criminals. Absolutely. But they're brilliant. They're brilliantly smart people. And one of them, I think, had a 1575 or 1580 on his SATs. That's nearly perfect. And they've all been academic achievers. So you may think they're stupid because of how they commit their crimes. Yeah, you can be brilliant, as even a genius, but not be a good criminal.
They're smart in one area, and they just happen to be stupid in another, unfortunately, for them. But
yeah, I mean, I've said it a number of times. If Einstein is probably the brightest person in the world, if he tried to kill Mrs. Einstein and get away with it, he could be caught by the police. Just because you're brilliant in one section of your life or some sort of discipline doesn't mean you have a lot of common sense and intelligence that you could apply to other spheres of everyday life. Yeah, these people were brilliant in one respect. So, mathematics and computer and AI but some of the stuff that they're brilliant about, predicting human behavior through mathematical algorithms, it's stuff. It's like they believe that you can reduce, human decision and human emotion to a table,
A mathematical theorem. Yes.
Yeah, so it's it's for all their brilliance, there's this huge spot of idiocy, and that they don't even realize how strange they look to other people when they act in the public. Like, for instance, Youngblood and Buchholz, by wearing like dark camouflage, dark combat gear, open carry in Vermont, and then acting very nasty to people and not complying with like the owner of the hotel, which caused a lot of people to be suspicious of them. So, as brilliant as they are, there's an area of stupidity.
Oh no, absolutely. According to the Vermont Daily Chronicle, Felix Buchholz is a former collegiate math competition winner, published author of mathematical research papers, and until last year was a New York City quantitative trader for a large international finance company, someone who, in the words of a college student who knew him, uses math to beat the stock market. His skills were so highly prized that the German national was working in the U.S. on a visa type given only to immigrants with extraordinary ability. According to the Vermont Daily Courier, sources in Vermont law enforcement and state government, Buchholz was a subject of interest to Homeland Security investigation a week before the shooting. The same authorities also knew that Buchholz and his two companions were armed with firearms. Buchholz's involvement in the gunfight, which occurred after Border Patrol stopped the southbound blue Prius with North Carolina plates, is not clear, at least to local authorities. I don't understand why he got involved in a gunfight, the law enforcement official said. I understand he did not start shooting, but rather someone inside the vehicle did so. The dead person was not the shooter, at least at first. So this is who he is. The law enforcement source said that Buchholz was in the United States on an immigration visa issued to people who have extraordinary or unique or specialized skills. An early press report that Buchholz was an illegal immigrant was inaccurate and has been pulled from the Vermont Daily Courier and national news sites. So, extraordinary ability in the sciences certainly fits Buchholz's profile. Over the last few days, the Vermont Daily Courier has done a deep dive into the internet for the only person identified as Felix Buchholz, a college math whiz until last year, and a New York City quantitative trader. So, again, a brilliant mathematician, but that doesn't make him a brilliant mastermind criminal, does it, Phil?
No, it doesn't. Bill, I want to go back to the Lind assault. Curtis Lind, when he was assaulted there in 2022, there was a cargo truck that was registered in Vermont. Now we have the connection to Vermont back then, near the scene of the attack in California. Inside the cargo van was surgical equipment, laptops, and high-priced electronics. So going back to that incident where he was assaulted and he was impaled and he was blinded, this vehicle registered in Vermont, it happens in California. Now you have the vehicle from Vermont with this unusual contents inside of it. Used surgical equipment, those laptops and electronics, they're going to have to get a hold of those and now do a deep dive into those items to see what was going on back then. Perhaps there was the talk of not paying the rent to Lynn, that they were living on his land in these cargo vehicles and cargo trucks. So the FBI really, like I said earlier, has their work cut out for them. One other thing, Bill, I looked up rationalists, and it says beliefs. Some of the beliefs are that consciousness people can maintain separate personalities by acting different. Activating different hemispheres of the brain. So that's pretty deep. They're talking about really off-the-wall kind of stuff, that you could have separate personalities and you can activate it by using different hemispheres of your brain. What that means, I really don't know, but that's one of the things. On Zizians, I looked up, I couldn't find too much on the structures and the belief of the Zizians, but I guess that remains to be seen.
100%. Mike, I mean, obviously he made a lot of money trading stock. So we questioned, like, how did they have money to carry on their activities? There was the answer.
Yeah.
He was paid a fortune, apparently. Even if he only worked there for a year, he made a lot of money, so he could maybe coast for a couple of years and get involved in a cult like this.
Yeah, and just think about it. He might have turned over a lot of his money to Youngblood or working with her. And there's that fierce loyalty between them because she gets out of the car, from all accounts that we know, she gets out of the car and starts shooting. And there he is with a 380. She's got the 40 cal. He's got the 380 in his lap. He gets out of the car and is about to shoot. If you know, that's a really loyal thing to do, because who knows how much he knew about what Youngblood was going to do. Was that a surprise to him, or was it not a surprise? Or they decided they're both going to exit on a count of three. We're just both going to get out, guns blazing. But when you look at that, look at the loyalty that those two have to each other. And it doesn't appear that they were romantically involved whatsoever. It looks like Youngblood was actually romantically involved with anyone. It would be Snyder when they got the marriage certificate. So there's this tremendous loyalty among these group members, and they're sharing whatever resources they have: firearms, money, cars, places to live, you know, that sort of thing. It's a very tight knit group.
You know, Mike, when we first started covering this, before we knew any of this stuff, we said the fact that the girl came out of the car banging, and I'm referring to Teresa Youngblood, she came out of the car shooting. And then now we find out it was 25, 30 minutes into the car stop, but she did get out of the car and started firing, according to law enforcement sources. That led us to believe, without knowing anything, that they were radicalized in some way. What 21, 22-year-old kid's going to get out of a car in Vermont, you know, with all of this stuff inside the car, if they're John Q. college student, and just get out with a 40 cal and your partner has a 380 and you're going to shoot it out with the border police? Doesn't make any sense.
It sounds like a suicide mission, perhaps suicide by cop. The
jig is up. That's right.
The jig is up. Are you ready to do this? And you know, they were going to. Of course, there was apparently 3 border patrol vehicles on the scene, perhaps as many as 3 to 6 border patrol officers. So, I mean, sounds like they were going to be outgunned. It sounded like a possible suicide by cop type of situation. Again, I go back to, what was it that these officers were about to uncover that made them get to that point of desperation? And Mike, I think you're right. It sounds like they were very committed to one another. And you know, she started shooting, and he got out with the gun, and you know, he was killed. She was wounded. But I would love to be able to interrogate her and find out what's going on. And, you know, obviously maybe she'll lawyer up, but it would be pretty interesting to see what's going on in her mind and see what's been going on for the past couple of years. Since I think a family lost track of her in 2024, they reported her missing. So it's a good while. And in that period before that, when we believe we'll use the word radicalized, there had to be something going on. And a couple of people in chat are talking about LSD. We talked about that. There was even talk of them, you know, experimenting with LSD. So has all the earmarks of the cult and the narcotic use, and just really very, very, very mind-boggling, to say the least.
I got to know. Thank you so much for the $2 super stickers. S. Bankman Vibes, Money, Dollars. Pauline Buckles, that's coming from their seminar teaching on rationality. Poem Paget, Sadist, Martha Sylvester. Derby property also purchased, not sure of that date, but that is Michelle's property, even though on Coventry voter list.
Right.
Diane, sounds like tinges of LSD experimentation. Well, she said she was experimenting. Teresa Youngblood was experimenting with LSD, but you know something, that's no excuse for killing somebody. You know, as we say, intoxication is not
It's
an
not a
excuse
defense.
or a defense to an offense, right?
Yeah.
Jane C. LSD probably used to access different brain hemispheres.
Good point.
We
Good
have some
point.
smart people in the chat, you know.
Good point.
Cindy Lou, I know people only use approximately 10% of their brain, but switching lobes. Urban infidel, wrong sex hormones are bad for mental, emotional health.
Yeah.
Fairy Tale Lane, ID, ego, super ego. You mean id, ego. Here's that's psychology 101. Id, ego, super ego. Bo Peep, with their amount of intelligence, they could have been making big money, so the path they chose makes no sense other than just being angry and mean. Yes, Bo Peep. Isn't that amazing? People are really smart if they use their skills for good things instead of bad things. They could and would be extremely successful, but it wasn't to be in the case of this cult. I want to play a little bit of this here, but back to the actual shooting.
21, and who is believed to be from Washington State, has been charged by criminal complaint with one count of using a deadly weapon while assaulting a U.S. Border Patrol agent and one count of using and discharging a firearm during and in relation to that assault. Her initial court appearance has not yet been scheduled. Now, according to the charging affidavit, during the afternoon of January 20th, Monday, a U.S. Border Patrol agent initiated a traffic stop of a Toyota Prius on I-91 in Coventry, Vermont. The car was occupied by Youngblood and a man who was a citizen of Germany and whose immigration status was in question. Youngblood and her companion had come to the attention of law enforcement a few days earlier when a hotel employee in Lyndonville, Vermont, expressed concerns about them being dressed in tactical clothing and protective gear while also being armed. Law enforcement also observed the couple in the Prius earlier that Monday at a Walmart parking lot in Newport, Vermont. At that time, the German man was seen wrapping unidentifiable objects with aluminum foil while seated in the vehicle here. Fox News Digital obtained some of these images of the Prius in question. Now, they say, according to the affidavit, during the January 20th vehicle stop, both Youngblood and her companion were armed. During the stop, she fired her handgun without warning toward at least one of the Border Patrol agents while outside the vehicle. Her German companion also tried to draw a firearm, and at least one Border Patrol agent fired his service weapon. The exchange of gunfire resulted in Border Patrol agent David Mayland sustaining fatal injuries. Youngblood and her companion were also shot. The German man was pronounced dead at the scene, and she was taken to the hospital for medical care. They say the investigation into this incident is ongoing. It's being led by the FBI with substantial assistance from the Vermont State Police and ATF in connection with Homeland Security investigations, HSI, U.S. Border Patrol, the Newport Police Department, and Orleans County, Vermont Sheriff's Department as well. So wanted to.
So what you see on the scene there too was robots because they were afraid that there were bombs,
Explosives. Sure.
So yes, some of you folks asked for the names of these folks. I don't have like mug shots, but this is the best we can do there. Teresa Youngblood, she's the one, you see her on the left there. She fired at the Border Patrol officer, David Maland, killing him. Next to her is Maximilian Schneider. And next to him is Felix Buchholz. He was killed in the car stop by the Border Patrol. And of course, that's Border Patrol David Maland. And then we have the Ziz up top, whose name is, I get it.
Jack Lasota.
Jack Lasota.
And he is in the winds right now. He is not apprehended. And the police are looking for him, as well as they're looking for Michelle Jacqueline Zako. So the manhunt is on for those two, but everyone else in this case is either in jail or dead that we know of. I'm sure there's more members of this cult that we're unaware of that haven't been put in the public eye either on this case or other cases. So again, folks, if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up. Hit the like button. Share us with your friends and your family. Anyway, I think this was interesting. A lot of things came to light that we didn't at first know. It's strange to me, Mike, and I'm sure to you, why Teresa Youngblood is not being charged with first-degree murder. That I just don't understand.
Billy, it doesn't make any sense to me because you've got her in custody, and poor David Maitland was fatally wounded at that and then died a short time later in the hospital. That's murder. So therefore, you got her. Why you wouldn't charge her with murder of a federal officer? I don't know. It seems rather strange. There's a lot that the FBI isn't releasing. They are very, very anally retentive. They don't talk. They keep their cards to themselves. But I'm sure there's probably a darn good reason why they aren't doing that, charging her with murder. But it's only a matter of time before they do. She has not yet been indicted by a federal grand jury, and I think that would be the appropriate time for charging her with murder.
Absolutely.
Mike, were the charges state level or federal level? The charges of the
federal level right now.
They were federal.
Yeah,
okay.
all federal.
So they're probably going to impanel a federal grand jury, like you said. And
Right.
I'm certain that those charges will be coming following. I mean, whether or not her bullet actually killed him or it was the partner, whatever it is, during the commission of that, that felony and acting in concert. So she's going to get hit with that murder charge for sure. At some point.
Absolutely. I guess that's your final thoughts, guys, right?
Oh, I want to give a final thought here.
All right, go ahead.
Real quick. I mean, to think about Felix Buchholz, he was a quantitative trader, extraordinarily smart. He receives a special U.S. O1A visa, and the visa says for extraordinary ability in science, education, business, or athletics. That's why he came into this country. Where did he go off the rails? I mean, this is someone that was extremely bright, extremely intelligent, probably had a great future in the stock market, trading, whatever it may be. And at some point, perhaps messing around or experimenting with LSD wound up going off the rails, but it's a really, really sad situation. He's now dead. He can't tell us anything, but I'm sure that the investigation will lead to some of those answers. Again, thoughts and prayers for Border Patrol agent David Milan and his family. And this is really some interesting case. Again, there's no animosity toward anyone in the transgender or LGBT community from us on this show, that's for sure, or in law enforcement, I'm sure. It just so happens that this is what these people are and what they're about. So it had to be discussed. And I'm very, very interested to see how this case plays out.
And G from the chat, planned, premeditated does not exclude murder. One, no, because in the commission of a felony, they killed the law enforcement officer. Okay. So that it doesn't have to be premeditation, planned, or anything. So that anyway, Mike, I stole your thunder. Your final thoughts.
Oh, Bill, I'm just thinking about as Buchholz, as Phil's saying, he seems to be the most recent person who has joined at least Youngblood as part of this group. Where would he? And we'll find that out through phone records and things like that. But why he would go off the rails the way he did, that's the strangest thing. One of the people in the chat, Casey, observed about, the idea that you get this person who's like a leader, and then there's a certain personality that just attaches themselves to him and again can be led astray. So this guy Ziz, whatever his rap is, he has the ability to reach people on a certain level that they respond to. And perhaps Buchholz quickly fell under some of that influence. And that's sad because that's a person who had the world at their fingertips and they were only like 22 years old. Amazing.
Mike, and G again, anything goes if the victim is a federal agent. A murder charge is automatically first degree. Would you explain the law, Mike?
No. If there is in states that have like the death penalty, murder one, capital murder, one of the qualifying offenses, parts of capital murder would be if you kill a judge, a correctional officer, a firefighter, a first responder, a witness, in a crime, a person under 12, a person over 60, a district attorney. There's special people that are protected, and then there's special circumstances. A torturous kind of murder, a murder for hire, and things like that. So therefore, you shoot a law enforcement officer, that's always going to be a murder. That's always going to be a murder.
A murder first degree.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Bill Cannon from Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.